Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our special board meeting. First, I would like to invite Trustee McCowie to read the acknowledgement of traditional lands and water.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water originally inhabited by the indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Huron-Wendat peoples in the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Thank you very much. Tonight we have all 8 trustees are present. Could I have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Trustee Cook, Trustee Buckler, all those in support? That's carried. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest for this meeting? No. Seeing none, we're going to move on to section F, but I do have some remarks that I'd like to make first. So, welcome to everyone, and thank you to all the candidates for investing your time and your interest in our trustee vacancies. First, I would like to remind everyone that this is a business meeting of the board. All comments must be free of content which is contrary to the Ontario Human Rights Code and other laws of Ontario and Canada. Behavior at all times from all persons in the room must be courteous and respectful. Now I will briefly review the process for the interviews this evening. So the order of interviews will take place alphabetically by surname. Each candidate will be sequestered in the cafeteria until it is time for their interview. Candidates have also been advised that the use of electronic devices while they are waiting in the cafeteria is prohibited to ensure a fair and transparent process. Also, personal reference notes or any other materials are not permitted to be used by the candidates during their interview. Director Houston will be facilitating the interview questions. Each candidate will have up to a total of 15 minutes to respond to all of the preset 3 questions. At the conclusion of that amount of time, the interview will be over. During the interviews, trustees will be listening to the responses and taking notes during the process. There is no disrespect meant to any of the candidates if we appear to lose eye contact with you. We do need to make notes so that we can distinguish the answers between the candidates and their responses. Once the interviews are completed, the Board of Trustees will vote by secret ballot, and voting will continue until one candidate receives the majority of the votes. The voting process has been shared in advance with both trustees and the candidates. 2 superintendents will be acting as the scrutineers for this process. Once the successful candidates have been determined, motions will be made to confirm the appointments of the successful candidates as well as to destroy the ballots. So at the end of each interview, candidates, you are free to leave the building if you want, or you can have a seat where you are now in the public gallery for the remainder of the meeting. The new trustees will be sworn in at 4 p.m. tomorrow during an orientation meeting with the chair of the board and the director. Then the 2 new trustees are also expected to attend the regularly scheduled public meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Candidates were also provided with a link to the regulation regarding electronic meetings as well as meeting attendance, which outlines the requirements for trustees to attend in person, and hopefully the candidates have had time to review and understand this important regulation. So we will now begin the interview process, and I will turn this over to our director.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. So the questions are there in front of you as a reference, but I'll read the question to you. If you're ready to begin, just let me know.
Sure.
Okay. So your first question is, what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? How can the board monitor progress in these areas?
So I believe the critical responsibility of a trustee is understanding and setting up strategic priorities for the board and the region and the educational system here. The way we can improve the student achievement and well-being is by understanding how diverse the student groups are in the area and how we can meet their needs. Understanding how different socioeconomic conditions are, how linguistically, culturally they are different. Even understanding what are the diverse needs or special needs of students with disabilities, and creating programs that would cater to some of their needs. As a person and as a new parent in the community, I have a 4-year-old going to one of the schools in Amherstburg, and I've realized that nothing happens without a plan, not even our lunches. So we have to have an approval from the board, which is my 4-year-old son, and nothing goes beyond that, and nothing gets executed by my director of education, which is my husband at home, if nothing goes through a plan. So having a plan and staying with the strategic priorities of the strategic plan that director of education has set up, and allocating funds accordingly is critical, I believe, as a board member. How can we monitor the board progress? So in my current role as global strategy director, I'm responsible for understanding what happens in the market, what is the customer saying, what are the capabilities of the company, and how our financial allocations can cater to some of the strategic long-term goals. And I believe that's the same that a trustee or a person at the board does. So understanding what the strategic priorities are and whether the financial resources and the budget is getting allocated to the right priorities. And if not, how can we maneuver? How can we adjust? And also understanding how the landscape of skills and demands is changing. I mean, a lot has changed in the last 2 to 3 years with AI and technology coming in. So how should we change our plans? How should we change our allocations to make our students more empowered for the coming future? I believe that's what's critical for a board, and to monitor whether we are staying on track is something that's critical. So I hope I've answered the first question.
Thank you very much. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary, but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, the role of a trustee is more governance and not operations. So as a trustee, I believe we are responsible for setting the priorities, approving the budgets, and hiring and evaluating the director of education and the staff. Apart from that, if there are any day-to-day tasks, I believe we have to find the right administrative personnel, direct it to the right staff, direct it and connect to the right people in the team who are responsible for those problems to be solved. However, if this is a prolonged issue and if multiple parents are bringing that issue up front, then bringing that topic to a discussion at the board level and to understand whether we need an adjustment in the priorities or we need an adjustment in the policies. That's something that I could do as a trustee member, but I wouldn't be getting involved in day-to-day operational tasks because I believe governance is something that the board has to do.
Thank you. And the last question is, how will you support the board's commitment to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
So I have moved to Canada 4 years ago, and being a person of color, being from a diverse background, I understand how the policies and how the commitments of the board are directly impacting some of the folks in the diverse backgrounds. And I will with my full support, I would definitely be involved in any of these commitments with the Indigenous education and dismantling anti-Black racism. I believe racism shouldn't have any place where the education is given. It shouldn't be a factor for deciding anything. The only consideration it should have is if some of the marginalized or the people who are not represented, if their voices are heard, and if we are making sure that the policies are catering to their needs as well and not biased in any sense. I've lived in different countries and I've worked in different countries all my life. I've been working in North America, Europe, Asia, and what that has given me a perspective is going beyond our personal preferences, going beyond our personal biases, but also understanding the perspectives of people, where they're coming from, and why they're bringing that topic. So I believe as a trustee, I would value those opinions. However, I would also not emphasize it or have it as a bias in my head when I'm deciding some of the policies.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay in the gallery or you're welcome to leave, whichever you're more comfortable with. And thank you very much for coming and for putting your name forward.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to the staff too, because there are a lot of amazing candidates. So very difficult decision. So thank you.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, living the dream.
Good. So the questions are there in front of you to reference should you need them. I will be reading each one of the questions to you. And as was mentioned, you have 15 minutes for the total of the interview. And I will start whenever it is that you're ready. You just let me know.
I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay. So what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
Oh, you want me to go one by one? Okay. It absolutely falls on trustees to keep well-being of both, keep student well-being and achievement at top of mind. That's the whole reason for existence as far as I'm concerned. And they do this by, well, the systems that are in place right now, for better or for worse, through the EQAO testing and other benchmarking. However, I think there could be a little more involvement with trustees on a day-by-day thing. At the end of the day, trustees are elected officials and are responsible to the constituents that have elected them in normal circumstances, unlike what's going on right now. However, even though appointing trustees seems to be more and more common across the province these days. And how can the board monitor progress in these areas? So think just like I was saying, being more active and involved day to day within the schools that they're responsible for, and not just necessarily reading reports, but getting to the schools, meeting with the principals, meeting with the stakeholders and teachers in a responsible way, not trying to interfere in the day-to-day process, because obviously trustees have nothing to do with the operational side of it. It's more on the governance side, but just so they can know what's going on, more so than reading words on a report, actually seeing it with their own eyes. And yeah, I'll leave that one there. Thank you.
And so the second question is, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Well, first off, engaging with the administration of the school board, so engaging with the necessary stakeholders to see what can be done within the terms of the rules, and how we can assist this child if there's see if there's a financial need that can be put into place that wasn't needed before because transportation was already available, or if there's anything else that the school board can do within the rules to address that, and if not, take it back to administration, see if anything can be changed, and from there, yeah, it's one of those things. I see why this is a question with everything going on in the last few months, and it's an unfortunate thing, but yeah, unfortunately, you're bound by the rules and the budget on these things, but there's always a way to get things, and there's always a way to get things done, even if sometimes you have to keep pushing at it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And the third and final question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
It's easily one of the most important things at early childhood education. No child should be treated different than any other child. All children should be treated with equity and respect. It doesn't matter what your background is. Everybody deserves the same good education. Nobody should be treated as less for any reason, especially their background or race. It's crazy we have to have these conversations in 2025, but here we are. And I continue with what the board has been doing, and continue to try to be a champion for this type of equity and inclusion, because there's no place for it. It's, as I said, it's a sad state that we still need to talk about this in this day and age, that it's just a problem that's not going away. And yeah, I'll leave that there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery.
Thank you very much.
Or you're welcome to leave.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Priyanka. How are you?
Good, thank you for asking.
Good. So the questions are posted there in front of you to reference, but I will be asking you each question as we go through the interview process. And whenever you're ready, I'll ask you the first question. Just let me know.
Yep, ready.
Okay. So the first question, what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
So, as we know, education is an ever-changing landscape. Uh, Depending on the challenges that the society is facing, we need to keep up with the pace. So, I feel as a trustee, we get the concerns from the society and then pass it over to the board so they can be addressed. Student achievement and well-being being a priority. Student achievement is difficult to interpret, as in it does not just happen between 9 and 3 of the school time. So we have to be in tandem with the families as well. And the same goes for the well-being, whether it's mental, emotional, physical. It continues beyond the classroom times. So we cannot just place that burden on the teachers, nor can we expect the parents to know everything as well. So I think as trustees, we are that bridge that will kind of carry forward the message from the school board to the parents and parents' concerns to the board. And as when it comes to monitoring the progress, I think regular meetings with the school and the parents, and then also set metrics like quizzes and the tests that we have will monitor how well the students are doing.
Thank you. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary, but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Okay. First and foremost, it'll depend on the reason as to why the family is no longer eligible for the transportation. If it was a misunderstanding or something that was overlooked, as a trustee, it would be my responsibility to bring forth their concern to the board. And if it's something that the board has already decided, depending on informed decision, then I will have to convey that to the parents, make sure they understand the reason and why the board decided on this decision. And also, it might not be part of my role as a trustee, but also work with the parent for alternate transportation methods, if possible, to help the family.
And the third question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
I feel this is one of the most important roles as a trustee that I would be entitled to. Canada, as we know, is a multicultural society. It's ever-changing. We have a lot of work to do in that regards. Just awareness, bringing awareness into the classrooms and even among the parents. So like I said, education does not just stop in the classroom. Getting parents on board with the school's message is also very important. So I guess working from what is included in the textbooks, what is being taught to the students, what is being conveyed to the students is as important as conveying that message to the families, to the parents. Because as a society, it's all of us included. It's the parents, the school, the teachers, and the students. So we need to make sure that everyone understands that being treated fairly is not a privilege, it's a right. So I think that message needs to go across to all classrooms, all schools. So I guess just getting that message across would be one of my most important roles.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery or you're welcome to leave, whichever one you prefer.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi there.
So thank you for your application. The questions are right in front of you on the desk there for you to have as a reference, but I will be asking you each one of the questions as we go through them. And whenever you're ready, just let me know and I'll ask you the first question.
Sure, you can ask the first question.
Okay. So what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
I think it all comes down to communication. You need to listen to the points of view from both the family side as well as the administration and the board members. As a member of a team, you work collaboratively to achieve the goals. So how can the board monitor progress? You continue to review all of your touch points and try to eliminate one or accomplish one thing at a time in order to reach your end goal. It's almost like a project management type thing. You hope that you can make little strides and improvements along the way and just do the best that you can with the resources that you have.
Thank you. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
I think my first step is to have a conversation with the parent, take down the notes, have all the details. My second step would be to review the policy as to why, what are some of the reasons that a child would no longer be eligible. Third, I would maybe consult, because I would be new to this position, I would maybe consult one of my fellow chair board members to discuss it with them, because they would have a little bit more experience, obviously, than I would. And I would also reach out to administration for clarification on things based on the conversation that I had with that family.
And the third question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
I have personally, because I've worked at the City of Windsor, I've been involved in a lot of inclusion and equity and various classes because I work for public service. So I can take that into consideration, first of all. I would support the board's commitments by reviewing the policy and ensuring that I am in compliance myself, and not only set an example of that compliance for the rest of the families, the board members, the general public, so that everybody could follow suit.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery or you're welcome to leave, whichever one you'd prefer.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, Selena.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you? Good. So the questions are posted there in front of you, but I will be asking you each question. Once you respond to the first one, then I'll ask the second one, but they're there for you to reference if you need them. And whenever you're ready to start, just let me know and I'll read the first question.
just want to get my thoughts organized before I proceed. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so the first question, what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
The student trustee is an elected representative for the parents. We want to be sure, of course, that the curriculum addresses the EQAO standards. The most recent results have been published. Those standards are, of course, reading, writing, and math, the math and literacy for grades 3 and 6 and 9. The EQAO testing, of course, is a good way to monitor those standards. A trustee would want to be sure that we're fiscally responsible, but we're also investing in resources that maintain an education for all the students to match today's changing digital world. And we also want to create a worldview-free environment that respects all cultures and all religions.
Thank you. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Ironically, I have a friend who just recently went through this. And what happened with her is that she did call her trustee, and the trustee had pointed her to a policy. She did end up speaking to the principal directly. She had asked for some sort of accommodation. I'm sorry to say she was not given one, but the trustee did sort of direct her through the process in order to try to accommodate the needs of her child.
Thank you. And the third question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to be honest, I prefer equality over equity, especially when we're talking about equity of outcomes. I believe in equality for
equality of resources, equality of opportunity, but unfortunately with equity of outcomes, you could end up passing a student through to graduation and they haven't got the skills. You could have a disadvantaged student that is perhaps graded on a bell curve because of their disadvantage, and maybe they're given a 60 when they actually deserve a 40, and the teacher, with all good intention, assumes this student has plenty of time to just catch up in the future year. But the next year they don't catch up, and then the year after that they don't catch up, and next thing you know, they've graduated and they have not acquired the necessary skills. As an example, regarding the diversity, there is some harm in that. We're actually right now, the GECDSB has a job posting for a temporary support worker. And if a person is interested in it, they can send their qualifications online to the job posting. However, if a person is First Nations and Métis, they send their resume and qualifications to a completely different website. And if a person identifies as Black, and I'm not sure what that means, they will send their resume to a completely different website. So what has essentially happened is there have been 3 groups created, an A and a B and a C. And I'm not sure who group A is, but there really should not be a group B and a group C, right? Everyone should be equal. And whoever the people are who are First Nations or Métis or identify as Black, I'm not sure how they feel about submitting their resume to a separate portal too, but whether they believe they're being treated favorably, or they know for certain they're not being treated equally. So, in essence, there's a lot of room for error there.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery, or you're welcome to leave, whichever one you'd prefer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Cheryl.
Evening.
So I think there's a notepad in the way, but underneath of that notepad is the questions. So they're posted there in front of you as a reference if you need them. I'll be asking each question individually, and then you can just let me know whenever it is that you're ready, and I'll start with the first question.
I guess I'm ready.
Okay. So what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being, and how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
Well, I believe that well-being, of course, that's a critical thing. It's the most integral part and responsibility we have is student well-being and student achievement. So I would say that for well-being, as a trustee, my first responsibility would be to make sure I'm well involved in strategic planning from the beginning, you know, to help set those priorities and protocols and mission statements and all those things that you as trustees have done in the past. Once I've been involved in that, I think my next step to really help with student achievement is ensuring that our students have safe schools and environments. We have to make sure that our students as well as our staff are being taken care of, where people can feel that they can enter a building and know that they are accepted and respected and that they are comfortable in the surroundings. And community people need to feel the same way. Along with safe schools and environments, as trustees, we need to ensure that the community is engaged in our education. We have to ensure that parents and other community members, even those that don't have children, need to feel that they can be involved, encourage them to be involved in activities in the schools. That's going to help students too with their well-being and sense of belonging. Along with that, I think that trustees need to certainly remember the staff within those buildings and the staff around the board. We need to, especially considering COVID in the past, we need to ensure that we are supporting their mental health and providing them with the opportunities for the professional development and training that they need to do their job effectively, because students are staff are directly working with the students on a regular basis, and it is them that really have an influence on students and can really help students with their well-being. Also, I think as trustees, we do need to be very careful with our finances to ensure that all students have the resources and teachers have the resources they need to support those students and help them to achieve and be successful. Economic times the way they are and the way funding is underfunded and what school boards are challenged with doing, we really have to, as trustees, be very careful that we are meeting those priorities and student well-being supports that they need. Okay?
Thank you. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Well, I will say that during my many years as a trustee, I did have similar situations to this. And first thing I've always done is when I receive a phone call from a parent, is I truly do try to listen to what they're saying and make sure I understand what they are saying. I also have to let the parent know that I myself have no authority to contradict school-based decisions or other decisions that go against policies and guidelines. And so even though I might be very sympathetic with the parent, I do have to explain that. I might have to offer to help the parent to navigate the system and maybe speak to a superintendent of transportation. It might be a matter where they have to deal directly with the busing consortium. Sometimes it might reach a point where maybe the director's office needs to be informed, but parents need to understand that a trustee cannot interfere with some of those type of decisions, and we have to stay within our responsibilities and the guidelines for what we can do. But we always do try to put the student and child first in every situation, following those policies and procedures.
Thank you. And the last question. How will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
as trustees, this is a big one. I think this all falls under the category of governance. And obviously, when it comes to governance, there's a lot of things that we as trustees need to consider. We need to know our roles well. We need to work within the framework of governance. So, as a trustee, first of all, we would have to ensure that our strategic plans were done in consultation with not only the director and the staff, or with ourselves as a group of trustees, but we would also have to include considering Indigenous advocators from the community. We'd have to consider people from the Black community, from any marginalized group needs to be involved with us in strategic planning and forming those goals and priorities that will set the education plan in motion for those people, those groups of people, and all of our students, no matter what issues they may have, concerns they may have, the supports that they need. We need to consider every student within our board. They are all important to us. Once we've developed those plans, we need to review our policies. They need to be carefully reviewed to ensure that they are meeting the needs of these students, even if it involves changing them. Then we have to hold the accountability factor for our director to monitor the staff, the schools, the programs to ensure that those plans and priorities that the board have set are being met to meet the needs of marginalized groups, no matter who they might be. We also need to consider the community involvement and encourage parents from every group to participate in activities at school to help support and to help break down those barriers so that we can more closely support their students and their children. We need to be educated along those paths. So I would say there's a lot we could do. And again, we do need to consider the students' well-being, but we need to consider everyone, including our staff, and what we can do to help support them to meet the needs of marginalized groups as well. So there's a lot we can do as trustees, but we need to keep in mind what our roles are in governance and what we can do and what we can't do clearly. And we must do them with open transparency and be very ethical in what we do, following the code of conduct. So those were just some suggestions. I hope I've made myself clear. I do want to just mention that during my 12 years experience as a trustee and formerly as a teacher with this board, I care about kids. I care about the students that we serve, and I have served in the past. And I would like to say that I know how long it takes for a first-term trustee to get up to speed and to fully understand the protocols for governance and the procedures to do governance well. I would like to say that with my experience, I understand that. And I know some committees have changed their titles, switched, that groups have been changed a bit from a whole committee to a group of 3 and things like that. But I would like to say that I feel confident that I could step into any position that you might have open or need someone to serve on a committee. And I feel I could get up to speed quickly and adapt to those changes efficiently. I am here if the board needs me. I would be thrilled to be able to step into any position. And I just want you to know, I want to thank you for listening to me and know that I am available here should you need me. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the interview. You're welcome to remain in the gallery or leave, whichever you prefer.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is it Hussam?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to mispronounce it. So welcome. The questions are posted in front of you on the blue piece of paper there for your reference, but I will be asking you each one of the questions individually. And whenever you're ready, I'll ask you the first question. You just let me know when you're ready.
Should we all good?
Okay, so the first question is, what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
Thank you very much for the question. I think to start off the question, it's very important for us to look at the role of the trustee itself and for us to differentiate between someone that is involved in operations versus governance. When it comes to being a trustee, I am aware that you're not involved in the day-to-day operations and the execution of the decisions that are made on the governance level, but rather be responsible for identifying the priorities, being able to identify what the priorities of the school board are, where we require change, and setting ultimately the framework that the individuals that are responsible for the day-to-day operations to execute. When it comes to what role the trustees have, like I mentioned, it's on a governance level. When being part of a governance role, you're looking at whether it's budgetary approvals, policies, being able to set the strategic plan for the board are extremely important on that end. And ultimately, those are the decisions that are going to carry forward the community's voice and the children within our community as well. I am someone that was part of the K-12 system, and I am aware of those changes. And I ultimately like to think about it as a ripple down effect. The decisions that are made on the governance level create a ripple down for all the decisions that are made beneath that. So it's the people that are involved in the day-to-day operations. They aspire and get inspiration from the decisions that are made on that upper level as well. When it comes to how the board can monitor the progress in these areas, it's extremely important to have an open line of communication with our community members. Being able to prioritize the feedback that they're going to provide is extremely important. We are all here at the end of the day to be a bridge for the community members, for the students and the province. And in doing so, we need to ensure that the decisions that are being made when putting student success and well-being at the center of it, we are getting that feedback from the community members, from the stakeholders, whether that was educators or the families or students themselves. But past that, it's also frameworks in which it could be a face-to-face, something that's more natural where you're able to represent the constituents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second question, as a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Like I mentioned, being a trustee and being part of the board is being a bridge for the community and being a bridge for the families and the public school board. When faced with a complaint, it's always very important to address these matters very, very seriously and ensure that they feel heard. We are here to represent them and we are here to ensure that their voices are heard. So again, thanking them for the concern, acknowledging the concern as well, but then ultimately understanding that the role as trustee, like I mentioned, is not to be involved in the day-to-day operations, but rather take concerns like these to the responsible parties to address these concerns. But then past that, it's also looking at how do we avoid repeating the same complaint. So if a complaint comes in, we are able to identify how can we as a board from a governance perspective address these issues, whether that was policy change, strategic plan changes, etc. And then allowing the individuals that are responsible for transportation to address these concerns. In terms of what steps I would take, again, it's bringing it forward to the board as a concern, ensuring that it is something that is addressed with the family and the community, and then past that, ensuring that we can look at steps that we can take collectively as a board to address these issues as well.
Thank you. And the last question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you very much. When looking at Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism and equity and inclusion, I don't like to look at those as just a program or something that you're initiating. I like to look at it as well as a governance lens. It's ensuring that in the decisions that we make, whether, like I said, it comes down to budget, the policies, the strategic plan, it's ensuring that we are looking at it, taking these things into consideration. The pillars for me are, again, mentioning justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's looking at each one and seeing how do the decisions that we make at a governance level influence us being able to fulfill our commitment to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism and equity and inclusion. In terms of how I will support it as a trustee, it's bringing that lens forward. Like I mentioned, I was part of that system. I am someone that not too far away from the system. I know the gaps that students are facing. I was in their shoes not too long ago, but bringing that perspective forward to the Board of Trustees, and also being a student at the University of Windsor as well, and serving as part of the University of Windsor Students Alliance, a lot of those pillars are very, very similar. We need to embrace equity, we need to embrace inclusion, and ensure that we have it at the forefront in every decision that we make collectively as a board, because to me, when looking at equity versus equality, it is not always about treating every single student identically, but it is rather ensuring that every single student has the resources that they need to succeed. So being able to do those things are most definitely going to support the commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, and equity and inclusion.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery, or you're welcome to leave, whichever one you prefer. Thank you.
We're going to take a break for a couple minutes. Okay.
Hi, Francine.
Hi.
So the questions are written there on the blue paper in front of you. I think it's underneath the notepad
Okay.
for your reference. I will be asking you the questions though. So whenever you're ready to start, you let me know and I'll ask the first question.
Okay. We can wait for the other trustee.
Sorry about that. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So what role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? How can the board monitor progress in these areas?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'd like to start by talking about my experience in terms of my qualifications and my experience and goal of applying that would relate back to improving student achievement and well-being as the first part of the question. So the reason I decided to apply for trustee was to be an advocate for students, student learning, and to provide any expertise that I have for student well-being. I want to give some of my history of my experience. So I have been an educator for over 20 years. First, starting off with a Bachelor of Education from the University of Windsor. I taught in this school board, so in the public school board. Since that, after I graduated from that, I obtained a doctorate in pharmacy from Wayne State University. And I have been teaching in pharmacy for the last 23 years. So I've been a professor. In this role as a professor of pharmacy, clinical professor, and a faculty member, I've been involved in educating students in well-being, resilience. I've also educated faculty members. I've been involved in being accountable for obtaining information about how students are impacted by what happens in the community around them, what's happening in their home environments. If you think about just COVID alone and what students went through during that time, I was involved at looking at well-being of our students in pharmacy and the impact that it had on their ability to provide patient care and their ability to learn in different types of environments when you couldn't be in the classroom setting. So bringing some of this all together, I want to also talk about that in addition to being an educator for the last 26 years, I'm also a pharmacist. And I think being both a pharmacist and an educator brings a unique aspect to this team of trustees in terms of having someone with some expertise in the area of healthcare, in addition to education. when I think about improving well-being in students and their achievement, putting students first and knowing what they want is what trustees, one of our responsibilities as trustees. So thinking about being their champion and looking at the data that is out there regarding their well-being is very important. And so let's use data to make decisions. In terms of monitoring that progress, it's obviously dependent on the data that's available to us and how frequently we monitor. And I know, as being a member of GECPIC in the past, as also being on parent council for the last 4 years at Riverside Secondary, we have data that's given to us as parents regarding students and their well-being. And so monitoring it as a board is an important aspect. And I think if we get information not only from students, but from parents, parents that are involved and our communities, we can make an impact to strategically plan for enhancements and things that we are doing as a board to support their achievement and well-being. I think we also need to keep in mind equity in all aspects of thinking about monitoring for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second question. As a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Thank you for this question. I'd like to give an example of a recent experience related to no longer having transportation. So in giving some history and context to the board, I was on a committee that looked at maintaining a program within the public school board. And when looking at this program, one of the things that was to be eliminated was transportation. And there were a number of parents that we found in the end were affected by this. And so some of the things that I did specifically to help support, along with a committee that I formed to help advocate for the parents in the community at Riverside, was to have meetings with these parents. We talked to the parents about what opportunities or other ways that we could help and support them in getting their children to school. We put out surveys to all the parents who had lost transportation for their students, that the students still wanted to be at that school. We put out surveys to see where every parent lived, to find out if there were ways that we could set up a carpool for those parents and support them. Other things that we did for them was look at alternatives to busing. We actually called the busing company to support them. So why I'm telling this story is because I think that I've dedicated some time to aspects like this for our board in particular. And now that I'm looking at this, one of the steps in terms of how would I handle it from a trustee point of view, well, I think the first thing is bringing it to the board and sharing the information. And as a trustee, you're a team member. You work with other members to make decisions on how it impacts the community. So I would have to have all the information available on how it impacts that parent that's calling and their children. There's only so many solutions you can offer. If there is something that the board can do in a reasonable way, I think that we should explore all opportunities to support these families. We're here first and foremost for the students. And so if they don't have transportation to get to school, then they aren't exposed to the learning that can be offered by our teachers and our system. So we have to find ways to support them. I think that having students be at the schools where their friends are and not forcing them to transition is an important aspect to take in consideration as well, thinking back about well-being for these students. So we know that transitions impact students' well-being. And so making sure that this student and their families' complaints are taken into consideration and are discussed and are brought forward is important.
Thank you. And
Thank
the
you.
third question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you for the question. If I have the opportunity to be a trustee as part of this board, I think that our role as a trustee is to make sure that we are creating or working together to continue to expand the strategic plans for the board, to have creative ideas in terms of policies and procedures that could be put in place so that we can make sure that we continue to have commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion. As I mentioned earlier, when I first spoke about the first question, one of the reasons I'm here is that I believe in equity and that I want to be a champion for equity in the system. And so if I can advocate for these populations, if we can work with our communities to make sure that we are inclusive and that there are policies put in place to make a difference and to make the experience for our students one that allows them to learn in a safe environment where they feel that things aren't going to change for them, that they have the supports they need, that they have individualized learning experiences. This is what we want to do as trustees. I think that's why we're here. This is to take care of the students within the board. And so I would work with the board members to make sure that we are looking at innovative strategies. I think some other things that can be done are applying for grants. Just recently, I worked with one of the teachers to apply for a grant for this board, and we were actually awarded $17,000 recently. So the board received $17,000 for a grant that I worked with one of the teachers to obtain. So I think there's things that we can do to make sure that people are also educated about our commitments. And so putting the word out there into the communities, providing people with support, offering sessions at different schools. These are things that we can do, involving our committees that are associated with the board in getting the word out there. I think there's a number of things that we can do to maintain our commitment.
Thank you. That
Thank you.
concludes the interview. You're welcome to stay in the gallery or you're welcome to leave, whichever one you prefer.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview again.
Thank you. Hi, Beth.
Hello.
So the questions are there in front of you on the blue piece of paper, but I'll be asking you each one of them as they come up. So whenever you're ready to start, you let me know and I'll ask the first question.
Okay. Okay.
What role do trustees have in improving both student achievement and well-being? And how can the board monitor progress in these areas?
Excellent question. So the trustees, that is part of their mission statement, that they want student achievement to be front and center. As far as their vision as well, they are committed to excellent education. The strategic plan for the board as well mentions student achievement as one of their top priorities. I think that the way for the board to monitor student achievement would be monitoring test scores, following up with schools as far as results, being engaged within their wards and their schools. That would be my answer.
Thank you. And then the second question. As a trustee, you receive a complaint from a parent who is no longer entitled to transportation for their child. They live in the same school boundary but are no longer eligible. What steps do you take to address this?
Having open communication with parents is definitely a priority. I think that in this particular situation, getting all the details would be imperative. I would be interested to know as a trustee why they are no longer eligible for the transportation. I think I would have to reach out to the transportation, whoever would be in charge of transportation, to see what the issue actually is, as to why that they're no longer entitled to transportation, especially if they are still in the same boundary. And I think that would be probably the steps I would take.
Thank you. And the third question, how will you support the board's commitments to Indigenous education, dismantling anti-Black racism, equity, and inclusion?
So all students are valuable. I think it's imperative that we treat all students the same. Each child has individual needs, which are extremely important. There is no room for intolerance of anyone, whether it's based on race, religion, creed, or sexual orientation. I think that public awareness is key to supporting the board's mission to end racism. I think that on top of education, we have to have open dialogue with all the partners involved, with parents, with the community at large.
Thank you. So that concludes the interview. You're welcome to remain in the gallery or you're welcome to leave.
Thank you to all the candidates. The trustees are now going to start voting for the first position, which is, pardon? Yep. Okay. So the first position we're going to be looking at is Amherstburg LaSalle. But first I'm going to give you a few minutes to look over your notes while they're giving out the ballots. I'll just point out that all the candidates are included on this ballot. Oh, thank you. What? Do we get to keep it?
That's what they're asking.
You're lucky. Question?
Yeah.
Okay. Question?
Just a question for clarification. We're just voting for one right now, right?
That's what I just said. Yep. So we're voting for the position for Amherstburg LaSalle. And I'll just explain while we're waiting that there were some candidates who just indicated Amherstburg LaSalle, some indicated both. So as a result, all the candidates are on this ballot, but going into the second ballot, it will be different. Okay. So the successful candidate for the position in Amherstburg LaSalle is Chandrika Abhang. Congratulations. So now this is for the Leamington Peely Island position. Thank you. And the successful candidate for the position in Leamington Pelee Island is Cheryl Lovell. So congratulations to both of you. I need to make it official with a motion from the trustees to appoint the two successful candidates as well as to destroy the ballots. Trustee Buckler and Trustee Cook. Any questions on the motion? That's including destroying the ballots, okay? All right. All those in support? Any opposed? No. That's carried. Thank you very much. We've now come to the conclusion of our agenda, so I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you. And you could leave the binders behind and we'll pass them in to the office. Thank you.